Okay, wonderful. I am so excited to be talking to Chip Conley today. I feel like I'm fangirling.
Well, I'm fanboying.
I love it. I love it. Let me tell you a little bit about Chip. And I talk about you all the time, so people probably
Mm,
know all about you, but just some fun stuff that I read. Um, so your life resume, which I love, and accomplishments, and I love that it's not just business, but it really is
no.
like life and heart transformation and life's journey. So, and I was just saying to him a minute ago that I love that I sort of geek out on the same stuff as you do. So, one of those things being Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
which I want to talk to you about,
Yeah.
and also celebrating aging
Mm,
and loving and enjoying the aging process. And in fact, I just said something at the airport the other day because people love to say, "Oh, you're 20." I need something about being 25, and I'm like, "Oh, hell no! I never want to go back to being 25. No, thank you. I like 53. Fine." Um, but anyway, we're going to talk a bit about your world of hospitality and your joie de vivre, um,
yes.
and this sense of even using Maslow's hierarchy
Mm,
needs in the work that you did there around leadership. And I'm fascinated by all the work that you did at Airbnb and Acton,
yeah.
really as a wisdom
Work,
keeper,
a wisdom worker.
wisdom
Not
worker,
not a knowledge worker, but a wisdom worker.
wisdom worker to help them when they were getting started. And then I really want to dive into your work on the Modern Elder Academy and
Yeah.
your new book that
Yeah.
is coming out, all about cherishing midlife. Learning to love midlife is the title of the book, but really learning how to cherish that and it not being a crisis. And we're going to talk about that. And I love your spin on that word or phrase, midlife
Mhm.
crisis. So, with all of that, welcome.
Thank you, Denise. I mean, we have, for those who don't know, we have some history in the sense that you and I got to know each other back around when my book Peak came out, if I don't remember, if I'm recalling properly.
Yeah,
And that was 16 years ago. So 17, almost 17 years ago, 16 and a half years ago. So, there's some history here. And it's great to see what you're doing in your life and this community that you've helped to create.
thank you, thank you. And I feel like I'm setting you up for a little bit of a your own medicine because you asked the question, which I think everybody should do. People to take on this challenge in peak of instead of answering what do you do
Mhm. Mhm.
with your job and your resume, how we so often answer it, by answering by what creates meaning for you. So
Mm.
I'm going to ask you, Chip, what do you do?
So I'll answer it with my meaning response. And I mean, today, over the course of your lifetime, there can be multiple things that give you meaning. And
Mm,
even at this very moment, I have 4 or 6 things I could say that give me meaning. And so let's be careful as a society, and especially in the US, that we have a tendency to get so wrapped up in like, oh my God, I don't have a purpose. Everybody
yeah.
else has a purpose, but I don't have one. It's
Right.
like it's like
Yes.
it's like you're talking about a BMW or something. I'm like, come on. I mean, the fact is we all have purposes. Sometimes they're a big P, sometimes they're a small P, and sometimes we're doing multiple purposes at once. I think what gives me meaning today, beyond just my 2 sons, who one of them had his birthday this week, they're just 12 and 9,
Aw.
is that I feel a deep sense of commitment to help people through an era of life, midlife, that has a really bad brand, the midlife crisis. And I think I may have cracked the code a little bit on this because
Mm,
I've been working with over 4,000 people from 45 countries over the past 6 years on this topic. And so I wanted to write a book about it because I felt this deep desire to share and wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And I wanted to share
mm.
some of my wisdom and share some of the wisdom that I've learned from others.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I'm so looking forward to sort of hearing that wisdom and learning from you and having people learn from you as well. You know, it's funny, when I moved to Key West 3 years ago, like my first week here, somebody said to me, "Don't ever ask anybody what they do in Key West.
Yeah, that makes sense. That
Just
makes
don't
sense.
ask." And
Yeah.
you can be talking to somebody who's a billionaire or somebody who, just working 5 jobs. And it has been something I lived by. And I've had the most incredible, amazing conversations with people. I'll sit and talk for 2 hours with somebody and we have no idea what each other do. And I just kind of love that because it's so not
I
our society.
totally agree. One of the questions I sometimes ask is, "What's juicy for you these days?"
Yeah.
um, and that's a good one. Or here's another one that's particularly important for people in midlife or later: is, which parts of your life do you feel like you're a beginner today? And that's a really good one because often when we get to midlife, there's a sense like, okay, I'm only going to play the games that I can win, or I will only do the things that I feel comfortable doing. And your life gets smaller and smaller. And so encouraging people to think about the fact like, oh my gosh, at any one time, I should always be trying to be a beginner at something.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
I signed up for salsa lessons.
Oh, good for you.
And and I did it. I hadn't thought about it for the midlife piece, but I did it because I tend to perfectionism. And so I've been
Mhm.
trying to do stuff that like I was really good at failing at salsa lessons. My
Good for you though.
perfectionist
Yeah.
just worked. I was perfect at failing.
Well, the key, one of the key messages we have at MEA, or Midlife Wisdom School, is helping people to realize that when you try something new, you're gonna be a bit of an oaf or a bit of a
Yeah.
neophyte at first. And if you cut yourself off from learning it, you will never get into the flow. And yes, there's some things we're just bad at, and then you can say like, oh, okay, I had a sense of humor about myself. And
Yes.
and and actually, one of the best ways to learn and is curiosity, having some curiosity about something, and then having a sense of humor about it as well.
Yes.
Because when we tend to be very self-critical, it limits our ability to make mistakes. And the only way we
Mm,
get better is by making mistakes. So,
yes.
and that's
Yeah.
true of life too. I mean, I believe wisdom is, our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. And I really believe that, having life lessons where, we skinned our knee or we broke our nose and
Mm,
metaphorically teaches us something
mm.
that will influence us in the future, as well as allow us to share that wisdom with other people based upon our life experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that sense of that looking at that failure for life
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah, I learned quickly that my hips don't move the way
Yeah.
they need to salsa. So then I signed up for belly dancing because I'm like,
Oh,
I'll solve
wow.
that problem. And so I go to belly dancing. I'm like, well, I'm bad at this too, but I keep on going. It's fun. It's very releasing.
Enjoy. I mean, honestly, the
Yeah.
fact that you're just enjoying being in your body, that's a really
Yes.
important thing, Denise. I mean, especially for women in midlife. I don't know where you are on your perimenopause or menopause journey. Where are you? I can't believe
Done.
I
I
met.
started
Is
at
it, you're,
38.
oh, girl, wow, that's
I
amazing.
know.
Is that was that okay?
No,
Oh,
no. You
well,
know
tell
what
me. I
happens?
mean, I can't believe we're talking about this. Is it okay?
Yeah, oh, it's fine. It's just so funny to talk about it with a man because
Yeah,
usually it's like your
yeah,
girlfriend you're talking about.
right.
But it's so true. It's been people don't talk about it, and
Yeah,
so and when it happens to you, you have no idea. Like I thought I was losing my mind, and
yeah.
I was crying every morning in the shower, and I would be crying like I had no idea why I'm crying. And I got my stuff all together one day, and my crap all together, and I was at a conference, and I went downstairs, and somebody said, "Morning, Denise." I was like, "Good." I thought I said it like good. And he said to me, "Well, that doesn't sound like the chipper Denise I'm used to." And I was like,
Mhm.
and I just broke down and cried. And I got home and I was like, "That's it. I got to do something about this."
Yeah.
And I went to the doctors and put on hormones and it was
It was smooth sailing.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Denise. I'm, as I think I mentioned to you, I'm going through radiation right now because of prostate cancer, and I had my prostate taken out in June, and I'm also on hormone depletion therapy, and the hormone depletion and radiation. So the radiation is like 36 different sessions. Like, oh my God, I don't
Oh,
recommend it for anybody.
yeah.
But the hormone depletion therapy basically takes me, to down to 1% of my normal testosterone.
Mm.
And so I am going through menopause. I am having all of the experiences of what it's like to be a woman going through menopause. Hot flashes, night sweats, brain
Really?
fog, emotional, roller coaster. So it's been really interesting. I have a lot of empathy for what women go through. But I was just, really sort of focusing on the fact that you're in your body, and that's a valuable thing to do in your 50s, is to be in
Yeah.
your body, because often as we get older, we sort of like almost disassociate from our
Yeah.
body, because
Yeah.
it doesn't look like it used to
Yeah.
look. It doesn't feel like it used to feel like. But one of the things I think that's beautiful is when people sort of just get more comfortable in their own
Yes.
skin, just as
Yes.
it, just as it starts to sag. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that. I've been practicing my hip movements walking down this. Thank goodness I live in Key West and not some stuck up place where I'd
yeah.
probably be arrested for how I walk down the street with my, because I try to shake my hips as I walk, because I'm trying to teach myself how to do that
You are a crack up. I wish I lived in the same city as you. I think we'd have a lot of fun just going out for the evening.
or watching me walk down the street.
Yeah.
Too funny. Um, so it's a democracy. What do you want to talk about first? I want to talk to you about the peak and your leadership
Mhm.
take and all of that. And I want to talk to you about the work you're doing on midlife. Where
Yeah.
do you want to start?
Well, because so just, yeah, my background, well, sort of like, let's go to peak.
Okay.
Started a boutique hotel company called Joie de Vivre, when I was 26, one of the first boutique hoteliers in the US, created 52 boutique hotels around California,
At 26.
was based, yeah, no, crazy, was based in San Francisco. And I loved it till I hated it. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting we're talking about this, because I don't usually have peak as a reference point in talking about this. So I appreciate that's when we got to know each other. I wrote my third book. So when I was a kid, when I was like a teenager, I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. My father in particular just made me feel like that is a stupid idea, Chip, because writers don't make
Mm-hmm.
any money and da, da, da. And I
Yep.
felt like, okay, I can't be a writer. And then weirdly, 20 years later, I'm giving a speech in my, mid 30s, having had a company that's growing fast, and I'm, young CEO. And I gave a speech, and there's a woman in the audience who was a literary agent, and she came up to me afterwards and she said, "Chip, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I laughed at her. I said, like, "Yes, I've thought about it, but I thought, like, no way I'm gonna do that, because that's not what you do when you get older." And she just said, like, write me something. And so that was my first book, and it was called The Rebel Rules: Daring to Be Yourself in Business. Then I had a second book, and then I had this third book that I really channeled. It was called Peak: How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, basically taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs and applying it to employees, customers, and investors, and to a vibrant corporate culture, and toward leadership. And that book came out in 2007, and
Mm-hmm.
it became a bestseller. And there were a lot of people like you, Denise, who just said, like, "Oh my God, no one's ever put into words or symbols in the book
Yeah.
what I believe business is supposed to be about, the philosophy of business and the
Yeah.
approach to a business strategy, and just understanding that these hierarchy of needs are really important. You have to understand people's survival needs, their success needs, and then their transformational needs." And so that book came out, and I loved going on a book tour for it. And I was like, okay, I think I'm done with the CEO thing of my boutique hotel company. And then starting in January of 2008, the hotel market fell apart because of the Great Recession. And
Mm-hmm.
the hospitality industry feels a recession faster than the rest of the world, just because people cut back on that kind of spending first. And so, oh my gosh, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to sell this company, or I'm going to find a CEO. I was like, nope, I'm not doing any of that, because we're now seeing double-digit reduction in our revenues, and we're running out of cash, because
Mm-hmm.
we were growing very fast at that time. So I had to go through a very difficult time from about age 46 till about age 49 when I struggled on many levels. This was also a time when I lost five male friends to suicide,
Oh
age
my
40,
gosh.
yeah, 42 to 52 during the Great Recession. It's when I had a long-term relationship ending. It's when my adult foster son was going to prison wrongfully. And yeah, everything that could go wrong was going wrong.
Yeah.
And then I had an NDE. I had a near-death experience. I had
Mhm.
an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. And next thing I knew, I was in the hospital in St. Louis after giving a speech. I was there for 2 or 3 days as they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But I went to the other side. And so like when you do that, you sort of like, oh, look what I'm seeing here. And it really shifted my life because I knew that I wanted to be more of a writer. I didn't want to be weighed down by having a company that I'd started and had 3,500 employees.
Mm.
And so, I came out of that hospital and said, you know what, over the next 2 years, at the worst time, I'm going to figure out a way to sell this business. And I did. And that gave me the time and space to start writing another book
Mm.
that became a New York Times bestseller, Emotional Equations. And
Yeah.
then soon after that, I joined Airbnb because the founders said, like, Chip, we need your help. We want to democratize hospitality and we don't know what we're doing. So, it's been a really fascinating journey.
Do you think you would have made that switch in your life had you not gone through that near death experience?
It's a really great question, Denise, because I have a tendency, I mean, I have a high pain threshold.
Hmm.
So when things are not going well, I just sort of grin and bear it.
Yeah.
I stick with it and I'm pretty obstinate and resilient. But so I don't know. I do know that what was going on wasn't working, and I don't. You never know. It's like sliding doors. You don't
Yes.
like with
Yes.
Gwyneth Paltrow. I don't know because it could have been a different circumstance. I feel like it was a divine intervention in the sense that I that circumstance of like dying helped me to see like how do I want to live my life. It became an organizing principle for how I lived my life, and I've quite honestly been very happy since then. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a
my 50s have been were my favorite decade. I'm 63 now, but definitely 50 is my favorite decade so far.
yeah. Yeah. Isn't that incredible when people sort of like once again want to go back to 25? No, thanks, right? Um, you know, uh knowing that part of what, and I think I've shared with you in this past, I had a mini stroke 4 years ago,
Yeah,
and I feel the same way that, and you read this all the time, right? Someone, they got cancer, this happened, that happened, and they say it's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life,
yeah, yeah,
as opposed to someone who wins the lottery and says it's the worst thing that ever happened to me, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, I look at that and I think, have how can or do you think it's possible, I guess, to have that experience of saying, okay, this is what I'm really
yeah, yeah,
called to do, meant to do? For me, it's I'm doing the work that I do in senior living. I love the work that I do in senior living. And I started doing this women's retreat 3 years ago. And such a strong calling. I just couldn't ignore. I kept on trying to ignore it, but every time I
yeah.
meditated, it would come back to me and come back to me. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it. But I if you would have told me 10 years ago I'd be meditating every day, I would have thought, like, you're crazy. That's not happening. And the fact that I'm meditating and now listening to messages I get from who knows where,
I
it's
see. I think you
quite
have like,
cool.
do you have like a little frog meditating back there? I can't tell.
Oh, it's a lion.
A lion. Okay. Okay. It's a lion meditating. All right. Um, yeah, I think one of the questions you could ask, and I think that you're getting to is like, do you have to have an NDE? Do you have to have a mini stroke? Do you have to have these external life circumstances that
Yep.
suck? No, you don't. And that's part of the reason that I created MEA, Modern Elder Academy. We'll come back to that though.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that um, people can be conscious about and intentional about how they change their life. It
Yes.
doesn't require
Yeah.
the shit to hit the fans. Excuse the
Yes.
expression.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, and I want to come back to that. One of the quotes in Peak that you had from actually from Deming was that primary duty of every leader is to remove fear from the workplace.
Yeah.
And
Well, people work better when there's not fear or anxiety. It's one of the things I talk about when I do leadership keynote speeches. Is like the toll of anxiety, not just on the human toll, which is really, can be incredibly difficult, because if you're creating an enormous amount of anxiety for somebody in your company, they take that home with them, and it has
yes,
a toxic effect on other people. But actually, I mean, even the toll it takes on your performance as a company. I mean,
yeah,
there's so much evidence on this. We're less creative, we're less innovative, we have less collegial relationships, we're less collaborative, we're less purpose driven. So there's all kinds of reasons why trying to reduce anxiety is important. I have an equation in my book, Emotional Equations, which is anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness. And if you
mm,
unpack this, that what it basically means is, um, when things are not going well, the most important thing you can do is to be transparent with your team, but clear about what the path will be. I mean, if you just say like everything sucks, like that doesn't help. So,
yeah,
but you can say like transparently, here's what's going on, and here's what we're planning on doing about it, and we want your help. And though we want your help opens up the door for them to feel like they have some agency. So if
yeah,
it's anxiety equals uncertainty, certainty is created by having more transparency, times powerlessness, saying we would like your help in crafting a solution, or here's what you can do in your job right now to make a difference for the company. That all of a sudden takes people into a place where they feel a little bit like they are not out of the loop, and they feel like they have something that they can contribute.
yeah,
So highly recommend that. I mean, it's one of the most important things a leader can do in a difficult time.
yeah. And it's for many leaders, the sense is I have to have all the answers, right? And I can't go before my team and tell them something because I have to be able
Right.
to solve this thing. And to
Yeah.
them, it's unsolvable. And that sense of actually you're helping really everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yourself, them, the organization by putting it out there and asking and this sort of almost martyr role sometimes that leaders take
Mhm.
on leads to that fear and anxiety and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I was interested in that. And the other thing I was interested in knowing your take on from a leadership standpoint is, so many leaders now um, look at the younger generation or people, whatever, older than
Mhm.
I don't know, 30, they look at like 20 and 30-year-olds, I guess, and
Mhm.
say, work-life balance, they're lazy, they entitled, sort of all these words. And I sometimes say they're just smarter than us. Like,
Well, they are brilliant, some of them. Yeah.
like who would sign up for, me giving myself a mini stroke over stress for what and so forth, and all the other stuff that we've kind of, when it was a cool thing to sleep 3 hours a night, right? That
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
these, I think back about like Giuliani when he used to talk about sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night, right? Look how that
And,
wound.
and he looked like it.
Like,
He looked like he had always slept 2 or 3 hours a night. Yeah.
uh, um, so I just kind of want your thoughts on this sense of, do you think this is our world that's now embracing? Because I'll tell you, I go to conferences. I just at a conference, and probably half the people I was talking to were whispering to me, I don't stay all those hours I used to stay anymore. And since the pandemic, I just realized that there's more to life. And they're all
Yeah.
telling me these deep, dark secrets, but everybody else is the next person I talk to has that same deep, dark secret. And to me, it feels like our world rather than one, cohort of or one age group doing it,
Well, I
generation.
think there's a couple things. First of all, I think that younger people, Gen Z and millennials, have been socialized into believing, which is a good thing, that they have more agency over their life. They don't have to live their life the way their parents said they have to.
Yeah.
I'm a boomer. I was trying to do my best to, meet my parents' expectations. You're an Xer, you probably had more of that than the average person who's younger today. So by the fact that they are more interested in finding their way and their whatever their path is a good thing, because it
Yeah.
means that they won't at 45 look back and say, how the hell did I end up in this situation? So there's that. But I also think that COVID really did, create a bit of a power switch over to employees from employer. And we see
Mm.
that with remote work and the arm
Mhm.
wrestling match that's going on with remote work right now, where employers are trying to get their employees back. Employees are saying, well, I don't know if
Yeah.
I want to do that 5 days a week. That's for sure. And so there's that going on. So people appreciate not having to commute an hour each way every day, 2 hours lost to commuting. Yeah, I'll come in 2 days a week. But that means all of a sudden, instead of doing 10 hours a week of commuting, I'm doing 4 hours, six
Yeah.
hours back in my life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I can see that, people are making conscious choices. People are choosing not to work in places where they feel it's toxic. But all of that has something to do with the fact we've had a low unemployment rate too. So,
Yes.
so the economy has been such that the power rests more with employees than in a normal economy. But who knows? I mean, it's been like this for, good 8 years. So we've had pretty good employment for a long time, other than, at the worst part of COVID. So I think it's all good. I think it means that we are taking care of ourselves,
Mhm.
and realizing that happiness leads to success. Success doesn't necessarily lead to happiness.
Yeah.
And we know that the data is pretty conclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. And this even, what defines success
Yeah.
anyway, right? So I think probably for us, a lot of it was financial, career, your
Mhm.
position, so forth. And, what is success?
Yeah.
And, I sometimes, when I'm here in Key West, I'll think about, to me, six, like, why do you want money? Why do you want, right? And it always kind of goes back to this freedom, right? To have
Yeah.
freedom. And I'll sometimes be riding my bike down the street and I'll think, my gosh, is there anything more free than right now? Like, I'm
Yeah.
smelling flowers and it's like warm outside, and my bike's decorated for every season. And I'm like, is there any more freedom than what I have right now in my life, in this country too, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just, I think, feel like, for me at least, even recognizing these things, that success, and then going backwards to, for what reason, and where can I have gratitude for something in my life that's already showing me those
Yeah.
reasons. Yeah.
Well, I would say, one of the questions we ask at MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, is, does money give you freedom or does it take it away? And it's a very interesting question and conversation
Yeah.
that comes from that. I love another question, which is, you and money are going to have a long-term relationship. Just know that. And
Yeah.
so if you're going to have a long-term relationship with money, and you went to couples counseling, relationship counseling with money, what would money say about you and what would you say about money?
Oh,
And
I love
it
it.
what it really helps is to helps people to get a little bit more conscious about their relationship with money. And
Yes.
we all need that. I mean, the bottom line is, I think by midlife, whether it's our relationship with money or our career or love,
Yep.
or the desire to be admired, or our relationship with our body, our relationship with spirituality, there are a lot of parts of our life that we need to get a little bit clearer about and conscious about what my relationship is with each of these things. The more conscious you are, the less it has control over you.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's part of what we do at MEA. But let's talk about Airbnb. You want to transition there?
Yeah, I'd love that. Yes, let's do
Yeah,
it.
because I talked a little bit about joie de vivre and about, the flatline experience and the desire to just sell my company. And I did. And then in my early 50s, I got a call from a guy named Brian Chesky, who's the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. And he said, Chip, how would you like to help us democratize hospitality? And I was like, oh, well, that's a great opening line. Who the
Yeah.
hell are you?
What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? And what is this Airbnb thing you're telling me about? This was 11 years ago. And most people had never heard of it. But it was growing fast. And so I spent the next 7.5 years, 4 years full time, 3.5 years as the primary part-time strategic advisor to the founders to help them take this little tech startup and turn it into the most valuable hospitality company in the world using the principles of peak. Part of the
Mm,
reason that Brian reached out to me is he said, I've read your book Peak and I want to be a peak company. I want us to be a peak company. So what an experience to be, helping to steer the rocket ship for, a business that grew that quickly globally and was that disruptive and controversial and as well. And so my job was the head of global hospitality and strategy, but I was also the in-house mentor to the founders. And I reported to Brian, which was
mm,
weird because Brian was 31 and I was 52 when we started. And I'd been CEO of my own company for 24 years, so I hadn't reported to anybody. And now I'm reporting to someone who's the age of my theoretical son.
yeah.
And I loved it because what I learned was and yeah, so I was reporting to my mentee. So what I really learned is I learned intergenerational collaboration. How do you do that? I learned about how to become a mentor and an intern at the same time because I'd
Huh.
never worked in a tech company before.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what an experience. I really loved. I also saw that wisdom is valuable.
Mm,
They said after a couple months they said, Chip, you're our modern elder. And I said, I don't want to be your modern elder. You're making fun of my age. And they said, no, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. And we hired you for your knowledge, but what we've really gotten is your wisdom. And to be honest with you, Denise, up to that point, 11 years ago, I never really thought about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Next thing I knew, I started to explore what wisdom is. And
mm,
wisdom is different than knowledge. Knowledge you accumulate, you get more of it over time. Wisdom you distill. So
mm.
accumulate, it's like plus, plus, plus is knowledge. Division equation is wisdom. It's taking a lot of information and distilling it down to what's essential. And so what a beautiful experience for me to
Yeah.
get introduced to the idea of my wisdom and of how do you create a company, Airbnb, that is dedicated to having wisdom management practices. Just like
Mm,
companies have knowledge management practices and knowledge workers, we are
yes.
we are all about how do we create wisdom workers and wisdom management practices. And that's what I did there, and I loved it. And then after my 4 years full time, I moved down to Baja in Mexico on the beach where I had a home. And I started writing my book, Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, which is my fifth book. And loved writing that book. But one day went for a run on the beach and I had a Baja aha. I had an epiphany. And the epiphany was, why don't we have midlife wisdom schools? I lost those friends to suicide in midlife. What if they thought they had more hope? There's all these people I've met at Airbnb who are trying to hide their age with Botox and things like that because they're scared that in the tech industry that people will recognize that they're 45 years old,
Mm,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just said like, okay, what if we created the world's first midlife wisdom school? And that's how MEA came about with our first campus in Baja and a second campus opening in April in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So it's been quite a journey.
yeah. And it kind of goes back to our conversation a few minutes ago about this, as a leader, taking away that fear and that anxiety of, the clarity and the powerlessness.
Mhm.
And it's like you're doing that for midlife for people.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Actually, no one said that. You're so smart. You're so wise. Um, yeah, helping people, there's uncertainty in midlife for sure. There can
Yes.
be a powerlessness too. And so there is anxiety as a result of that. And how do you help people to realize, oh man, some of what you're going through is just normal?
Yes.
Midlife has it's a bit of a crazy time of life. You're going through a lot of transitions. And therefore, understanding what those transitions are and which ones are normal and what kind of practices and tools do you have available to you to get through those? How do you cultivate purpose? How do you actually cultivate your wisdom? And how
Mhm.
do you have less fear around aging? There's a woman named Becca Levy at Yale who's shown that when people can shift their mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, they gain 7.5 years of additional life.
Mm.
And so that's actually more life, Denise, than if you actually stopped smoking at 50 or
Wow.
started exercising at 50. So the psychological or emotional state you're in and you're feeling around aging is exceptionally important. And so that's part of the reason MEA exists as well, is to help people to realize that they could actually see the upside of aging. And that's my new book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is basically a pro-aging, not an anti-aging message.
Yes, yes. I've taken to writing an anti-aging ads. Anti-aging equals dead, and because if you're not aging, you're dead, right?
Yeah,
And
and it's anti-growing. Like aging and growing are the same thing.
yes, yes. So I love this sense of it's giving clarity around what's happening. And just, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, when you're a baby, there's stages, right? And everybody knows that. And then 2 years old child, you just got to put up with the terrible twos, right? And then, teenage years, the teenager recognizes, like, hopefully, that some of this stuff is temporary, but at least the people
Yes,
around them, you might be driving them nuts, but you realize this is temporary, and they're going to go
that's
through
right.
that. And then for some reason, it just kind of stops.
Yeah. Well, it's partly for there's so many different reasons for that. Number one is adolescence, which didn't that word didn't exist till 1904, taught us that your teen years are the liminal space, the transition space between childhood and adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, midlife, also known as midolescence, is the liminal transition space between early adulthood and later adulthood. And that's why it's midlife,
Yeah.
mid adulthood. And therefore it is a time when you're going through a lot of transitions. And yet we have no social support, no rites of passage, no rituals, and very little in conversation about what this era of life is about.
Mm.
There were three life stages that got created in the 20th century, or got discovered, so to speak. Adolescence, which existed before, but we didn't have a word for it prior to Adolescence in 1904 becoming a famous book. Um, you were an adult when you hit puberty.
Mm.
And then there was retirement, which became a big thing in the 1920s, 1930s, for all kinds of reasons. And both adolescence and retirement got a lot of love. Midlife was sort of discovered with the term midlife crisis in 1965, because we went from living just on average 47 years in 1900 to 77 years in the year 2000. We added 30 years of longevity in one century. And so midlife became a thing, but all it got was a bad brand and almost no love or academic research or governmental support.
Mm.
So I'm coming from the perspective of like, hey, midlife deserves some love.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe you learn to love Brussels sprouts in midlife. Maybe you learn to love classical music at this age, but now it's time to learn to love midlife as a life stage.
What do you think that it didn't get, that it got such a bad rap?
I think first of all, there's lots of Hollywood movies that have been made about the midlife crisis. Think
Yeah.
American Beauty with Kevin Spacey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So first of all, it was an easy thing to make fun of. Secondly, midlife is when you're expected to be most competent in being able to handle things. But when
Mm.
you're a teenager, maybe not. Maybe when you're in retirement, maybe not. You're a senior, and so there's an element of like, hey, stop complaining. You're
Yeah.
in midlife, like you can handle this. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so self-indulgent to be focused on myself in midlife, because I should be focused on my being a sandwich generation person, meaning taking care of my parents as they're getting older and taking care of my kids. And so there's an element of like, midlife is not a time for us to dwell on, like, just get over it. And
Mm.
but the midlife suicide rate today is 50% higher than it was in the year 2000. So yeah,
Really?
yeah. So we better recognize this is not a life stage that should be neglected. And as we've learned at MEA, the world's first midlife wisdom school, there are such tools and practices available to have people realize this is the best era of their life, because it's when you're more conscious and intentional about how you want to curate the second half of your adult life. And
Mm.
54, our average age is people who come as 54. 54 is exactly halfway between 18 and 90. And the
Huh.
number one age that our 4,000 alums think they're going to live till is 90. So 54, the average age of the person who comes to MEA, is exactly halfway through your adult life if you start counting at age 18. Most of us at 54, you're 53. I mean, most of us at that age think like, oh, wow, my best years are behind me. Or, I guess I'm going out to pasture or whatever. And like, no, you have as many years of adulthood ahead of you as you have behind you. And
Right, right.
therefore you got to be a beginner again. Therefore, you've got to try new things. Therefore, you've got to actually have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset.
And in working through some of that, going back to the equation, it takes away the powerlessness too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can be intentional
Oh
and
yeah, exactly. Having agency, and it's interesting, agency and ageism and agency. When you have agency and you don't feel like the odds are against you, and you have some ability to impact the world and the world around you, you generally are happier. There's a really fascinating study that was done in nursing homes, and they gave people the ability, like they gave them not pets, they gave them plants to have in their room with the intention of seeing if you gave someone plants to actually to care for, would it help their mood? Would it help their longevity? Would it
yeah,
help what it would do? And there was a bunch of evidence that showed that just being able to care for a plant or a few plants had a positive impact on people.
yes,
So it's again agency, because the plant is almost like having a child,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's fascinating,
but a
the
lot easier. But a lot easier. Having a
but a
child is a
lot
lot easier.
easier.
Yeah. Let's be
I won't
let's
show
be
you my
clear.
half dead plant in the corner over here. Um, it's fascinating because that's my world, senior living, and to see sort of how our government has taken such the fear approach to it. And
Yeah.
so you have people that live in nursing homes or assisted livings, and they want to even help each other,
Mhm.
and yet it basically it's not allowed, right? It's
Yeah.
they'll get in trouble for something, or something goes wrong and so forth. And I just remember one time, this place I was working with, they had gotten in trouble because a resident was helping another resident, and I think she was feeding her cheese doodles.
Oh God.
Right,
You know,
and they got a deficiency, and they got in trouble because this resident should not have been feeding another
yeah.
resident. And somehow it came up, and then the resident looked at me and she winked and she goes, I still do it.
Yeah. We retirement communities are, I mean, in the 1960s, that's when they got created, and there was a big need for them. And there's still a need for retirement communities. But at MEA, with our, an older population and many of them getting older and older, we create regenerative communities. And the difference between a retirement community and a regenerative community is a regenerative community is based upon wisdom and regeneration principles. So
Yes.
to regenerate something is to bring life back to it. We do it around a regenerative farm or a ranch. So there's some agricultural principles that are called regenerative agriculture. And then we have regenerative living principles, which are how do we help people to constantly renew themselves, and how is it intergenerational? So it's not a 55 plus community. It is a community of people of various ages, but still with an older demographic on average, and a real desire for people to connect with each other across the generations. So our first one is in Baja, just a mile from our MEA campus in Baja, and it has 26 homes around a regenerative farm, and it sold out like that without any website or any plans.
Wow.
So yeah, I think there's a real demand. And I think the challenge for the retirement community or the senior living world is it's a very real estate centric world. And therefore it's really hard to change overnight, because
Yes.
you've put everything in place, and this is how we operate.
Yes.
And there's not nearly been enough innovation in this space. And I've given lots and lots of keynotes on this topic. So if anybody wants me to come and give a keynote topic on senior living and why retirement needs to turn into regeneration, feel free to reach out to me.
I love it. I love it. It's so true. I just said to somebody last week, I when I was 20 years old, so 30 something years ago in college, everyone was talking about the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And people are still saying the same exact thing they were saying 30 years ago. We really need to look at this because it's such an older population and the younger population caring for it. And I'm like, we've been saying this for 30 years. Like, what have we done? Really? And
I
there's
know.
no major, I mean, there's small things that have happened, but
Yeah.
there's no real major innovation.
But it's an industry that's sort of ripe for disruption, partly because
Yes.
it is struggling a little bit because, the average age of when a person comes into a retirement community is 10 years older than it was about 10 or 15 years ago. So it's just skewing older. And, there's more and more products that are helping people to stay at home, to, age at home. And most people want to age at home.
Yes.
So I would just say it's an industry that is about to get disrupted and is being disrupted in certain places. And the occupancies in these places are dropping. Now, of course, there's the most well run versions of them in just the right locations with lots and lots of waiting lists. So I'm not saying this across the board, but
Right.
yeah,
100%.
yeah, the marginal players are going to be feeling it first.
Yes, 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 yes. Because there are some great organizations, and
Yeah,
people say things like, "I wish I would have come here sooner,"
yeah,
at those places, and then and there's others that are selling something that nobody
yeah,
actually wants.
yeah.
Um, what are you learning now? What
What
are you
about?
working on? What are
What
you
am I
what are you
working?
learning? What do you?
I mean, learning to love midlife. My new book is, doing the research on that and looking at what are the 12 reasons why life gets better with age. We're very clear on what doesn't get good with age. I mean, our body, gravity takes hold, and our short-term memory is not as good as it used to be. Our recall of names, there's a lot of things that aren't as good as they used to be. Our body feels the age and the creakiness, the joints,
Mhm.
etc. But the thing that's so interesting is that most of the reasons why people think life gets worse with age is because of the physical side. And
Mm.
they're totally neglecting the emotional side, the spiritual side, the relational side, and
Yeah.
frankly, even the mental side, because and the mental and emotional, because frankly, our emotional intelligence grows with age.
Mhm.
And our ability to think in a crystallized intelligence kind of way, as Arthur Brooks wrote about in From Strength to Strength, um, the ability to solve problems with a systemic and holistic way of looking at things is better as we get older. So there's a lot of things that get better as we age, and yet most of them are not well known in the public.
Yeah, yeah, and we kind of dwell on this stuff that is the not so good
Yeah,
stuff, as
yeah.
you shared, and none of that. Anything I didn't ask you that you want to tell us about, and then I have one last quick question.
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so here's my quick question for you. You could leave a message in a time capsule for future people to open up in 50 years. What wisdom or advice would it contain?
Oh my gosh. I think the wisdom I would offer is something that comes from Native American traditions. Think 7 generations. Think 7 generations ahead of you. Make decisions that will make you a good ancestor.
Mm,
And a lot of times we don't think that way. Um, but I think the Native Americans in the U.S. thought 7 generation thinking, and I think if we think 7 generations, we will be more thoughtful about the long term influences of the decisions we make today.
oh, that's incredible. I love that. I've not heard that before. So
Yeah.
that's really impactful.
There's
Thank
a
you.
great Eric Erickson's a famous developmental psychologist, and he says,
Yeah, yeah.
"I am what survives me." As we get past age 50, that's the question that we should be asking ourselves. So the thought which we should have is, "I am what survives me." So.
Mm.
Well, thank you, Denise.
Thank
It's
you.
such a joy to be with you, and hope to see you in person. Come on down to MEA. Actually,
I know I got to get there.
if you and your colleagues ever want to come and do a private MEA workshop or just a private retreat, just tell me.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I would love that. Thanks,
All
Chief.
right, all
And
right.
I'm praying for you all good
Thank you,
outcomes.
thank
And
you,
yeah, look forward to talking to you soon. Happy
thank you,
holidays.
thank you, my dear. All
All
right,
right. Bye.
bye.